Thank you everyone for coming. I know there's a lot going on. I think it's FinTech San Francisco week or something this week. But we like to celebrate Palo Alto. And that's why we're here tonight. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Farah, who's the attorney tonight who's hosting and has supplied the drinks for us. And Farah's just going to tell you a little bit. She's a startup attorney here at Carnegie Mellon. Thanks, Farah.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Farah Chowdhury, and I'm a startup attorney here at Shepherd Mullen. I work with startups in all different industries, and we're so thankful that you could join this event, and we're really looking forward to hearing what the panel has to say.
And if anyone wants Farah's cards and you can't find it, we've got some out on the registration desk. So first of all, I'm going to introduce Mark Albertson, who's a journalist here in Silicon Valley and one of our advisors, and he's going to moderate tonight. Jomari's taking photos of himself, selfies. And I'll leave it to you to introduce the other panelists.
Well, thanks, Pamela. This is a great subject tonight. I was really pleased to get the opportunity to moderate this panel, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion. We're going to share the mic, so I'm not going to be the only one holding it here all night here, because the audience is here to hear you, not me. So, so along those lines, let's just go ahead and kick things off by having each of you just briefly introduce yourself and the organizations you're involved with and your involvement in the blockchain. So, Daisy, go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Daisy Ozim, and I'm the Director of Blockchain for Social Justice, where we focus on developer training, investment education, and use case design within marginalized communities.
Hi everyone, my name is Anita Wieberg, and I'm the CEO of Seva Exchange Corporation. We are a spin-off of Time Banks USA. It's a nonprofit that's been around since 1995, I think. And what we do is time banking, and we've already talked about alternative currency and things like that. We've addressed it rather for the last 23 years, and we thought, why not blockchain? Move over to, instead of time credits, to Seva coins.
Good day. My name is Jomari Peterson. I tell people go wherever my name is. Jomari going from Safari and it's Ferrari. Jomari, it like helps a little bit. So I'm working with my same cryptocurrency company, the Digital Reserve. We're trying to eliminate predatory lending, which is like payday loans to 40% on average, and microfinance, which is like 45% on average, using cryptocurrency networks. We believe using cost-based proof of stake, we can actually mitigate some of the risk of default and actually increase economic productivity on chain. And I'm also working on developing out a concept around leveraging opportunity zones in a way to actually help people to defer their capital gains tax and invest that to low-income communities, and how we can actually use crypto economic networks and blockchain to actually better facilitate it and bring some transparency to that process.
Hello everyone, my name is Vivi Lin. I must say that this is the most diversified panel that I have been on.
Yes, indeed.
So I'm doing a couple of things. Actually, I am, like Mark, I'm a journalist. I have my own TV show focused on innovation, but right now we focus on blockchain. So I have the show On the Blocks, which is focusing on the blockchains and crypto space. And my previous background, I worked for Reuters, financial TV for many years. So I'm a business person, and since my background, having lived and worked in China, Europe, and here, so which give me a lot of resources. So I'm also working for a crypto fund. So we invest in projects and startups that really create real value. And I'm also advising startups in the Bay Area and also in China on their media strategy and also blockchain-related projects.
Excellent. Okay, so let's get into some of the subjects that I think are kind of interest in this space. And when I was doing some research in advance of the panel tonight, I came across one little tidbit that last year the European Commission launched a $5 million competition. It's like 5 recipients for whose use of the blockchain created solutions for positive social change. So this is not just a local or one country really is on blockchain for social good. This is really a global thing. So what's driving global interest in this area? What are the drivers behind this right now? What are you seeing and hearing on this particular issue?
Okay.
Great.
Oh,
Okay. I think what's really driving this whole push for social impact now is the catastrophe that happened in Puerto Rico. And some of the greed that we've seen with a lot of the ICOs where they've raised like millions and millions of dollars overnight. And folks really just trying to kind of separate themselves, kind of distinct themselves aside from that dark side of this industry. I really, just kind of from what I've seen for a lot of these different social impact challenges and some of these companies that claim they're about social impact, it's really kind of like lip service and really a tax write-off in many ways, because if they were really interested in some of these communities that they claim that they want to serve, that they'd be on the ground talking to the people who are actually working in those communities. And this is not something new. Like I come from the social impact investment space, SoCap, Region, Social Enterprise Alliance, all of that. I'm on the board for the Bay Area Entrepreneurship Alliance, and a lot of it is lip service, right? Because if they were interested in real social impact, they would be going straight to those communities, straight to those organizations already working with those folks to get them those resources, and not reinventing something new with a whole team of folks who, it's really mainly white men, a group of white guys, right, from Silicon Valley that know how to code, right, and then they build up this project. They don't even ask the people who they want to serve, hey, is this actually gonna work? And they get millions of dollars, right, to come and put this project out. Just one good example of this was the situation, if some of you may not watch social justice news or whatnot, but the situation at the border, when the children were being taken away from their families and put into these different tent encampments, someone started a Save the Children token. Who are you? Where did that money go? Still to be discovered.
That's actually sad that you mentioned that, because one of the reasons why this commission started, I think, was the problem with corruption in governments and the lack of transparency in using blockchain. Of course, they're hoping to address that. The second one is, having blockchain with a new set of tools that, that will give the new person, the new guy, a chance against the incumbent. So those are, I think, the two drivers behind it.
Jomari?
Yeah, from my perspective, during that time period, I actually reached out to a couple of organizations that actually put out those requests. And it's one for them to just a bet. It's a risk. They're seeing a lot of innovation, a lot of great minds being poured into the space. So it's really an opportunity for them to try to direct resources towards creating something that reflects the needs that they want. It's not that they really care about the technology. It's about saying, oh, it's an opportunity to bring some focus into this space. And for $5 million, $5 million for the exposure that it brings is worth it. However, also what they also recognize is it does provide them an opportunity to create new systems or new approaches to actually solving their problems. Because that's really the issue with a lot of government entities. It's the brain drain. It's just the lack of people who are able to bring out innovative solutions. So if they're seeing people are saying, oh, if I can direct a little bit of these minds who are interested in cryptography, game theory, mechanism design, and programming, and to create a solution to create a better world via this tool, well, then we're willing to give it a try. But what really matters is kind of how it's executed. Is this kind of I'm a kind of upfront, I don't really care for permission, but permission blockchains, anything that's like has controls over it, because then it kind of reflect, you might as well use a database. So what matters at the end of the day to me is like, how are they executing it? Are they really actually utilizing this tool to its full capabilities? Or are they actually just putting up the handicaps on it and saying in name, this is what I'm building? But I think that's the rationale and the reasoning typically that people are looking at it. It's just another way of trying to attract more attention to their cause.
I think adding to that, I think just also, blockchain really gives people the idea of giving access of information and sources of funding and everything to the people, to the disadvantaged people, or people promised to people who didn't have the benefits of the internet era promised to give them. So I think that goes back to the idea, like Anita mentioned, decentralized and giving the power back to the people in terms of data, in terms of assets, in terms of financial means and everything.
Well, you mentioned sources of funding, so let's talk about that for a minute. I think the first question is, how do you get funding? I mean, there's a lot of tech companies that have difficulty getting funding for enterprise-related projects. You're talking about doing something for social good, a great cause. But funding is particularly tough right now in the cryptocurrency world, at least, as we know, because of what's happened with some of the values over the last 6 to 9 months. So funding, how do you get it? And then what's the model for making money, if you have one, to do so in this kind of field?
Well, as I've been working with, at that stage right now, in working with investors, it doesn't matter if they're a social impact investor or VC, they want to know the bottom line, how are you gonna make the money? So that is not any different. So, but also, in my perspective, I mean, even if I'm doing a social impact good and blockchain thing, I obviously have a business model that will make a lot of money. It's also going to have a huge impact on people's lives. So that said, I've noticed so many social impact I've gone to conferences, I've met investors, but it seems very elusive. It's hard to find. I don't know why, but it seems like, wow, it seems like it's out there so much, but why are we not getting it?
So this question has been interesting to me because when it comes to social impact investment, the first myth or the first issue people face is the idea that social impact is correlated with nonprofit work. Mm-hmm. Social impact can be profitable. Social impact can be profit maximizing while also serving a need and a good. So the issue first that people face, like conveying that part, when you have a limited time to explain your business concept, and their first thing when they hear what you're pitching and they hear the problem you're solving, they think, oh, this is a nonprofit. Even so, they don't actually hear the business model that's underlying it because they get caught in the problem that you're solving and realizing that that's a social good issue, and they don't realize the profit opportunity, so they don't give it enough time. And then underlying that issue, you then have people who are interested in social impact investing, a lot of times are a little bit more risk averse than those who are profit maximizing. So therefore, you have social impact who want to make this massive, ridiculous change in the world, but they're conservative in how they approach resolving those problems. Right. So therefore, you're looking at people and saying, hey, I'm trying to eliminate like poverty. And they're like, via this new technology, yeah, that's a little bit out there. I don't understand that technology well enough. Now, I understand these solutions, and I want to invest in these type of solutions. And that's a little bit of the problem that exists in this space. It's the spectrum where people sit. So it comes down to being able to find people who are aligned with your values and interests. And when it's a smaller sliver of people, well, that means that there's less funding in that space, unless you kind of stumble across somebody who just has a passion that has Googleplex money. But aside from that, that's kind of.
Can I add to that?
Okay.
Take away whatever you need to.
Thank you so much. I think another issue too, with that, they do correlate it to nonprofit work, but I also think that there's not a clear definition in terms of what social impact really is and what that looks like, right? Like for instance, let's give Tom's shoes. For every shoe we buy, we're gonna give a young person a pair of shoes. That fails. And where's Tom's today? I don't even see them or hear about them. And I think some of the social impact that is being facilitated is really watered down and really like surface level. And these folks, they come into our communities. This happens all the time. I was actually on a panel on decolonizing social innovation with Pacific School of Religion, and we were talking about this issue. And it's really the savior mentality. I'm gonna come into this community, and I found a way to make a business off of trying to help them. And it's really another form of disenfranchisement, because if you really want to help these folks, you would actually empower them, give them the tools to build out solutions to the issues they see in the community, because they're closer to the problem. You can't come to me and be like, hey, I'm gonna give you the solution to fix your problems, because you're not in my body, you're not in my mind, you're not in my experience. So you obviously will not know. Even if you go and read like the different academic literature, that's also washed out too, because that academic system operates in a very, I would say, patriarchal, elitist system that perpetuates certain frameworks and perpetuates certain ways of thinking. So we're talking about social impact, you have to talk about that too. And with the whole social impact networks, like I'm with all these folks, usually the problem is, like Jomari said, they want to really increase their triple bottom line, and they just put social impact on it to make it look nice. But as we move actually more into the future, what's going to end up happening is these social impact platforms, right? That's actually what's going to create the mass adoption of blockchain, because some of these enterprise these finance, entertainment, et cetera, blockchains, they're going to be absorbed by the big, like they call it FAGMA, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple, right? They're going to be absorbed by that conglomerate, right? And then the real projects that are going to work on the ground are the social impact projects that are working with school districts, working with universities, working within the healthcare system, et cetera. So it's actually in our best interest to start funding some of these blockchain for social impact projects, because that's actually what's going to get your tokens to be of value overall.
And also in terms of source of funding, and realistically, this is what is happening, right? So if you pitch a VC or investor about any social impact project, then they look at you as if we are not doing charity.
Mhm.
But don't get me wrong, there are some places that you could get funding, and realistically from it's more instead of bottom up, it's more from up to top down. Yeah, from top down. Especially look at the places where they have they make a lot of money out of ICOs. So exchanges, crypto exchanges, they are really right now. Binance just announced they got they're doing they're gonna go be very active in impact investing, and also Hobby, a lot of those heavy players who already make a lot of money, and so they would be interested. So if you are in this area as a startup and you want to pitch, funding, and I really suggest you go for those people who already have money, and then they can afford to lose, or they can afford to take a long-term view for the social responsibility image.
That's what we would think, right? But unfortunately, we know all those people. We still haven't been able to get a red cent out of them. See, the problem is there is something called AstroTurf, and there's something called grassroots. There's these AstroTurf organizations like the Red Cross and whatnot. They get billions of dollars a year or whatever, and they're seen as like the shining star nonprofit. And then if you really look deeper, they major mismanagement of funds.
Right.
The folks that are supposed to actually claim that they're serving are not being served, but they continuously get money. I used to work in philanthropy. I'm actually on the board for a foundation, so I see this all the time. And there's a lot of nepotism too in that space. It's not even about actually how good is your program, how effective is it that I'm not in a rebuttal to you, but I'm trying to get folks the game because I come from that space. So excuse me, hold on 1 second, just 1 second, okay? So the problem here is there's a lot of nepotism, meaning it's not even about how effective your program is that it's serving folks. It's actually about, I actually know this person, we were friends back in the day, I'm gonna give them some money, or their nonprofit appeals to like whatever kind of surface level mission that they say that they're doing. But if you really look down on paper, they're not really doing the things that they say they're gonna do. They just look good on GuideStar, which is where people go to look at nonprofits and they upload like their tax documentation and whatnot. That's literally how a lot of folks get money. So the whole game
you're
is rigged.
absolutely right. I agree with you. Actually, I hear a lot. I talk to people on the ground, and then that is exactly what I hear all the time. So, this is also one of the potential, hopefully, that blockchain is gonna disrupt them. Those expensive NGOs out there, non-efficient and everything, because for example, we see startups doing, resound finance. So you basically use blockchain technology to chase, and then so you cut off the middleman, and it's much more efficient that way. So and then the money that's coming out as donor and everything investment, they really come down to the people needing those help.
Well, let's bridge off of that because. The blockchain, as we know, is a significantly disruptive technology, especially when it comes to the traditional financial system as we know it. So looking at blockchain for social good, who or what entities or societal areas, who's going to be disrupted? I mean, where does the disruption fall when we're talking about this particular issue? I'm just curious on some of the specifics and what you're looking at either doing yourself or what you're seeing out there. Who wants to start?
Well, I know in the 90s it was all about the middleware companies. I would say anyone in between helping the middleman, those jobs are going to be gone. That's the biggest disruptor I can see. Anyone who owns a centralized database like the banking industry, finance, people will start choosing between, hey, can I do this or have someone in blockchain that's more transparent? I prefer this, and then they'll have to change. So I don't think they're going to go out of business anytime soon, but something will it will make them realize, okay, we have to be more transparent.
Yeah, well, personally, for the digital reserve, I know we're working on eliminating predatory lending using cryptocurrency networks. So we explicitly hope to eliminate the payday loans, period. Like payday loans are 40% on average. And we believe if we actually are successful in our mission of reducing interest rates while still providing the same level of accessibility from a global capital pool, we believe that that is one direct way of eliminating an entire industry that has been predatory and actually being very bearish and mean and every word that's negative to underserved communities. So really for us, that's one space that we're looking. How we also, when we think about eliminating, we also think about areas where we supplement. We think for microfinance industries, microfinance, which has high interest rates, not because they're trying to be predatory, but typically because of the cost of outreaching to their clients. We believe that cryptocurrency networks, blockchain networks can actually provide that level of efficiency they need to actually increase the scope of their service and to expand places that they've had difficulty reaching and provide the protocol infrastructure to actually execute on those things. So in that way, we actually would supplement their capabilities and while they're reducing their interest rate. So eliminating payday lending, in our case, and supplementing microfinance.
I have a question. Do you think I always thought about sure, faith-based lending. I used to work in subprime auto, subprime mortgage, and watch bizarre things happen. So, if you were able to go to a big mega church with 10,000 members and have them create the cryptocurrency token and then use the power of persuasion of that group to increase the probability of payment, what does that enter into your mind?
So, as someone, I typically don't to talk about my faith a lot during these events, but as someone who's Christian, I grew up, there's a party called Acts where they talk about the fact that everybody had everything in common. And then from there, they actually created an economic system where people were attracted by that and they shared their resources. I actually find faith-based organizations as actually a prime example where cryptocurrencies would actually be really effective because you actually have a collective of people who share a sense of value, are supposed to share a sense of value about what they have and what's being done. So if they actually bring together themselves into actually agreeing upon a system of account amongst themselves, that would actually be a very powerful way for them to economically empower themselves and those around them. So I think that's one of the best applications that could exist. However, I have difficulty assembling people in that space under that line of thinking currently. But yeah, faith-based lending, faith-based cryptocurrencies in general, I think is actually a very powerful tool that has not been looked at a lot, which is one of my things I plan on doing after I kind of do things that kind of have a larger scope. But I definitely, that's an area I'm into a lot. I can talk about that a lot.
So we're talking about the industries that we believe are going to be disrupted.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely in the philanthropy industry in terms of creating more transparency and being able to tokenize existing philanthropy funds. I'm actually doing a lot of work with certain foundations in the Bay Area on that right now in order to actually increase the number of organizations that they can fund a year to expand on the work that we're already doing. That's one space. And then also within every, I believe it's also going to disrupt labor a lot with smart contracts, blockchain coupled with AI. Microsoft is already working on something in that space. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs too. So these basic universal income blockchains are going to be really important to help kind of supplement that. What would you even call it? Demise of labor. Whoops. And then lastly, I think blockchain is going to be really hopeful for local and state government. I don't think the federal government would ever be able to put themselves on blast and implement a blockchain to track the federal budget to see where the money is how it's being used and distributed in real time because there's so much fraud. It's okay, so where did that go? Where did this go, right? Because they always want to track us, let's track you. And I think that's a little bit of fear with blockchain. Now we can kind of flip the script, I have the gun now, right? And I think lastly is systems like the criminal justice system, the foster care system, the food industry, because in each of those systems I've actually helped major nonprofits actually create blockchains around some of those issues. And there's so many ways in which blockchain can be used to actually save taxpayers' dollars. to really reduce people who are suffering within those systems and to streamline funds so we can get the work done quicker. Because, we're depending on human beings that have human error, and unfortunately, some people are going to lose their jobs, right? Because we're not going to be able to sit there and click and check paperwork and whatnot. But the system is really delayed because there are people with bias, right? There are people who don't want to do their jobs. There are people who tap out. They have millions of emails. So blockchain can actually help us with those processes as well.
And I want to add something just to the industry that I have been in, media, and so like media nowadays suffer from several problems: fake news, censorship in some countries, and business model. Right, the media is not making money, it's suffering, and you have to depend heavily on advertisers, so that you lose your integrity and independence sometimes. So I think with blockchain, media can really, of course, it could reduce the possibility of fake news if you could just hold a bar and you can check everything, and then all the information stored on the chain and cannot be tampered and it cannot be taken away. So censorship, cannot do anything about it. And in terms of business model, if we look back in how the business model in media has evolved, in the old days, publishers, if you publish a book, writers get 10%, 90% of the money goes to publishers. And then later on, Amazon, nowadays if you publish a book on Amazon takes 70% and the writers get 30%. And if you're a content creator or, if you post your stuff on YouTube, and even in big stuff, probably you get 50%. But with blockchain, with beauty of tokenization, you tokenomics and decentralized and everything. So it's a when the adoption happens and everything, so content makers could get like 90% of the profit that out of your work. So that really gives the power back to you are free from your independence, and then you have your integrity. So I think that is the area that we can.
Well, let's talk for a second about tokenization, because that's been a hot topic, as we know, particularly in the last year, as kind of the field exploded. In doing some research before this panel tonight, there's a token out there I found called GreenLink for sustainable product origin, on the social good side. Are any of you considering tokens, or okay, Anita, and then where do you see this going where social good is concerned? Is this just as reasonable a field for tokenization as any other?
Well, we're tokenizing volunteer time. So, again, I didn't mention it before. Time banking is you give an hour of time and you receive a time credit redeemable for an hour of time of something you need, right? You volunteer and then someone will volunteer for you. So we thought it made sense that we could change all of volunteering and tokenize it. So for me, it made a lot of sense. But people are tokenizing all kinds of things, and some things I find absolutely ridiculous, but there are really good examples out there.
In regards to the tokenization aspect of things, my perspective about that is that there are definitely a lot of use cases where things can be tokenized. There's loyalty cards. That's one of the areas that can be disrupted as well. Like loyalty cards, you have points, and then turn into a system, it's turned into a network that has some value relative to what's going on inside that network. And typically, you can take those points outside. Those are specifically within that network. You get Luckies or Safeway points. You can't trade them or move them anywhere else. So you have situations like that where there's a network effect that they're trying to leverage and build capacity in. So tokenization works in that case. Tokenization works when you're trying to create a value system just in general around something. However, the main issue people actually face, I find, in the social good space around this development is they're trying to tokenize things that they have a hard time actually representing the value inside a real and tangible way. For example, like within a blockchain implementation, your blockchain or cryptocurrency is only as good as the data that goes into it. So if I'm trying to say that I'm monitoring the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, where am I validating the data that there's so much carbon being put into the atmosphere? If someone starts a fire in their backyard, am I going to capture that data? Because if I don't, well, then you start having this bad data going into it, and you actually have a system that reflects incorrect or bad information that's not reflective of reality. And that's a lot of the information, that's a lot of issue around blockchain technology, even around the voting aspect. It's like there's things outside of the network operations that we have to consider. How information is put in and the forces that happen outside of the network, because you can't just depend on the internal network if you have things that have real life facing consequences. The reason that cryptocurrencies typically work is because all the operations are internal to the network. There is no aspect that operates outside of the network. Once you introduce these other vectors or these other aspects, you actually introduce additional complexity and issues. So the tokenization, I absolutely believe that is viable. This way is actually creating, reducing friction in some ways in some activities. Because like if you could actually tokenize all your airline miles and then move them seamlessly across, that's immensely valuable to people. Maybe not so much for the airlines, but for the individual as a consumer, that's beneficial. However, if you're trying to tokenize something that you can't really quantify clearly the value of what's happening, that's when you face issues. So I hope that was clear.
Awesome, thank you. I think that's real because what I see is a whole bunch of, they call them shit coins. Excuse my language. And they're filling up all the exchanges, but at the end of the day, like what real purpose and what real value are you adding besides just a whole bunch of people being able to cash out and get rich quick? We're gonna be launching a token. I'm actually building out a blockchain protocol for public health. That's the space that I come from, and I definitely see our project is gonna be definitely worthwhile there. But I think where some tokens can have an advantage, especially social impact projects, is being able to incentivize behavior changes that reduce social dysfunction issues. So I can have a platform, let's say for instance, kids not going to school every year costs our school district in California about $1.5 billion. I can create a blockchain platform, I can create a blockchain platform to incentivize these kids going to school, and it's actually backed by the number of days that they do not miss, right? We can use this for youth who have habitual truancy, because I used to be a high school teacher, and those kids are a mess. So that type of situation would be a really good way to design your token economics around. But when you design your token economics, the things, I'm just gonna put this out there, this is a part of my master class, the things that you have to look at are, what's your game theory? There are 8 different forms of capital. What are you tokenizing, right? There's natural capital, there's intellectual capital, there's cultural capital, right? What are you tokenizing? And then also, what is your consensus mechanism? You have to think about those things, and also what behaviors are you trying to change? And then what's your game theory around that? So when you think about those core concepts, then you'll be able to really create like a powerful token that can last and outdo some of these tokens that are about to fall off the market. She has a question.
I have a fundamental question. I think great insights, by the way.
Just use the mic so
But because you were talking about inefficiency in the philanthropy impact world, so the key problem is inability to really evaluate the impact, right? So how an outsider, don't really know how blockchain is going to solve that problem. Can you explain to me?
Okay.
Better evaluate the outcome?
Okay.
who wants to take it?
Yeah. So now we're getting into consulting, but this is the way I would do it if we want to talk about actually quantifying your impact down to the individual. First, what sector? So let's say I'm a foundation and I fund criminal justice reform, right? And we're funding organizations that keep young people out of juvenile hall. Okay, first, how much does it cost to keep young people in juvenile hall in the first place? That's open source data that we can actually start to use, and that's what a lot of these different white papers and stuff like that, they're gonna get more academic as time goes on, because you're gonna need open source forms of data to validate what you're talking about in the first place, right? So an example, all right, so we know that it costs such and such a day to keep a young person in juvenile hall, because I don't know if folks know this, but parents have to pay per day that their young person is in there. And if you're low income, it's a different rate, right? But there's a standard state rate per each state. So okay, how many juveniles are in the state? Or how many young folks who are currently incarcerated or predicted to be incarcerated every year in the state? They have that information too. Okay, how many young people am I serving a year that I kept out of trouble, kept out of juvenile hall, etc.? Then I can start to quantify the impact that I'm having based on those youth that I'm keeping out of this system, and then I'm actually shifting into doing other things like getting employment, etc. Because everything does have a dollar amount on it. So there's an organization I want you to look up, it's called McKinsey, and they do research studies where they actually quantify the dollar amount of how much systemic oppression costs within each category. How much does CPS child abuse cases cost?
But there were previous cases where government actually issued social impact bond, trying to solve that problem, like talking about this problem. Like this is one of the more easily quantifiable, I guess, space.
Mhm.
But a lot of the social impact spaces, it's harder,
Yeah.
much harder.
So in the social impact space too, is different too from like the social justice, public sector, how would say social service system. So then you're still dealing with like nonprofit versus public sector as well, and they operate in different ways as well.
Jomari?
Yeah, so the reality is, when you're running a business, you don't only do metrics. Social impact companies and businesses are typically running a business. However, if you take the reality that a lot of them are also facing such a slimmer budget that they're operating from, they pour their resources into typically executing on their product and not necessarily validating or relooking at their strategies and verifying the measurements against their goals. And that's a lot of times not because they don't want to, it's because they don't have the bandwidth or capacity given their funding where they are. And that's actually and that's a business investment and a business desire, because that means also that people who are investing in them aren't pressing them as much about that. And that's because they're not looking at them as a viable source of their income and to look at making sure that their business model is executing. They felt good about putting money in the first place, but they didn't really expect anything out of it. So when you have people actually investing in it and looking for something to actually be delivered, they start holding them accountable against all those measurements. But typically they don't, and that speaks to issue as well, because when you look at businesses, everybody's gonna come back down to those numbers. How many people serve, or where you serve, or what's your growth rate, what's your burn rate? Those same questions aren't as frequent inside the social impact space, which is where we should be moving, because we are building businesses, we are building viable alternatives. So.
That's why when we did incorporate, we decided to be a public benefits corporation. Even if they're not asking us, we want to be accountable for that. So any investment money we do get, that they look at both the social impact we're having as well as bottom line, the numbers.
Yeah, good point. So I want to kind of switch gears for a second to go to the dreaded R word. Did you hear another?
Oh, no, I didn't hear Jake, sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. And that has to do with the word regulation. And no blockchain or cryptocurrency panel would be complete without at least raising that as a potential concern. It was interesting, the country, some of the leaders in the country of Malta actually came out in support of blockchain for social good. I mean, here we have a whole country voicing their support for it, yet I don't think, unless I've missed it, we've seen that in the United States. So does this concern you at all? What are you seeing or hearing, and could this have an impact on what you're trying to do?
Well, to be fair, Malta is a much smaller country. We have to overcome federal, state, local government, all bureaucracy. So I'm not concerned that our government didn't just go declare that. I think in our country, it's up to the businesses to do that part.
Yeah, I haven't been particularly worried about that aspect. However, it does hamper fundraising in some ways, because operating within the regulatory framework can be difficult and also hamper some of your resources, because I actually had this thing I call the decentralization of fundraising, whereas ICOs had a lot of rampant things going on. It also democratized fundraising in a way that allowed a lot of people to participate in, so you can get volume to raise your fund versus a few people giving you a lot. And as we actually look at the regulatory framework, it actually benefits those who just have a lot. I mean, we have accredited investors where that system is you either make 2 years of $250,000 or more, or you have net assets of $1 million or more. And that's basically saying those only people that can invest inside these businesses at the early stage, does that mean people without that much money are dumb? Are they unsophisticated? What was this telling you? But how, when you're operating that framework, I mean, those are the things you have to face. However, on the flip side, if you're actually developing a cryptocurrency business that's decentralized, you actually don't have to worry about that issue up until the launch of your network in reality. Because after your network's launched, it's no longer in your hands. It's a decentralized entity, hopefully, that's operating by people globally around the world. So it's no longer your responsibility. So your real issue is maintaining that regulatory framework up until that point. That's kind of been my perspective. Is like, hey, I know I as an individual have to hold to that line up until the network's up. When the network's up, well, that's a separate entity and business, and then I'm just a participant in that thing. So that's kind of the framework and approach we've taken in our mental model of this particular issue.
Yeah, I think really we need to look at this issue, like Malta is a small country, and it's not only just a problem with, like US has a problem with blockchain for social good, it's like more of a blockchain issue, right? So blockchain doesn't really, it's very early stage, and then also if we look at it from the global perspective, like US is, SEC and all these policymakers, they do need some more time to really gauge where the market is going and where the industry is, what industry is doing. And even from, like the two major, several major big players, US and also like China. China is pretty much all out in terms of in terms of crypto. But if you talk to people there and PBOC and I talk to my sources there, and people are on the government level, they're still very bullish on blockchain itself. So crypto is out. ICO and everything is totally banned. But it doesn't mean that they give up on blockchain, and then they just want to bring people's attention to the limitation of the technology, and they don't want the hype. They don't want people to like lose money, and then they cause riots and everything. So we need to look at it from different perspectives. So from top down, of course, governments is hesitant, and probably they're not so welcoming as smaller countries like Malta and elsewhere. But like Jomari said, bottom down, we do see a lot of, like a lot of funding. A lot of people are, still have faith in the space, and the funding is still, people are not losing hope yet. Even this is the crypto winter. So I think it's not only just the issue with the social, social impact, but it's more of like where the market is where the market is right now.
And I think a lot of the reason why the market is kind of where it is at right now is because of United States regulation, right? It's kind of strangled the market, and everyone's going to Singapore now.
Yeah.
But I think something that we have to realize in America is America was built on an imbalance. It was built on certain people having and other people not having. It was always built on that. We live in an oligarchical, well, now we're going into a fascist society, so we just evolved into that. But I just want us to remember that we had a government that literally put birth control in the water supplies of certain populations to stop them, right? We had a government that actually stopped certain veterans of color, it's called redlining, right? Stopped them from being able to access the GI Bill, that stopped them from being able to buy homes in the suburb and build generational wealth for themselves, okay? That's what this country is built on. So I don't think that we should look at it any different when it comes to blockchain and crypto. The powers that be are still going to find a way to make it so that only the top folks with all the money, et cetera, get to play, and that poor people stay in their poor position, because that's how you maintain a destructive and corrupt government, right? So we should get out of that thinking that, like with the whole situation you're talking about Malta doesn't have the same history as the United States, right? They don't have the history of slavery and what happened with the Native Indians and the racism against Muslim folks, et cetera, right? That's something that is very American. So we have to look at our culture as a whole and see how our culture is actually designed to actually strangle innovation, right? So like I was saying, we were at a conference in DC, and some of the folks at the conference, they came from Africa. And they were like, I paid for my taxi using crypto in Kenya, right? And then you turn on the TV and they put these Feed the Children commercials. That is, it's not realistic. It's not real to actually what's happening on the ground. They're still trying to make it seem as if these countries are behind innovation. We have to go there and save them. We're the one that needs saving, really. Especially what's about to happen with, I just can't with this country.
And in regards, I want to say on the regulatory side, like for China, China is out of cryptocurrencies created by random individuals. They want to maintain their sovereignty and governance, which is understandable. So they have an exit out actually of eventually doing official cryptocurrency from them as a state. It's just that these underlying kind of revolutionary anti-whatever their system is, like in America, for example, people were surprised how the United States actually adopted their approach right now to Bitcoin in general. People were expecting it to be more scared, but lo and behold, the United States, like I said, it's just a part of our commodity space. It's like, well, we're going to actually just consider this part of our fabric of what we are. So the cryptocurrency space has reached a point for most places where it's disruptive to their actual operations in a significant manner. However, the reality is that's the vision that a lot of people have. Like I said, we can build an alternative currency that represents our value outside of these regulatory bodies. And that's what people forget sometimes. Like, really, you're building something that might not match the goals of the area. For example, we're building out, one of the businesses, Digital Reserve, is building out basically peer-to-peer lending. Peer-to-peer lending has a lot of regulatory things inside the varying areas. Some people say so you can't pool funds. Other ones want certain different things about the people that are actually lending and where it's being spent. As a cryptocurrency network, what we're developing doesn't necessarily have those checks and balances, because we're actually aiming for maintaining sustainability of our network versus those specific things that a governmental entity might be worried about. So that's the reality between what regulatory bodies might want and what actually these cryptocurrencies that are supposed to be meta to your geopolitical location is considering, because you're building things for the world versus for your country. So that's the thing.
Just one comment. So Save Exchange is partnering with Manabase that's doing crypto, like universal basic income coins. So we know if we're going to wait for universal basic income from the government. I mean, I know there's a little bit of it in Alaska and some other states are going to try, but like Hawaii, the congressman told me it will be at least 10 years. We can't wait 10 years. So what we're doing is using capitalism to implement socialism.
So we're going to turn over to questions in just a minute, but I want to just kind of ask the panel one other additional question, which has to do with your own backgrounds. I noticed in looking at the bios that panel sent out, there's a few of you that have come from the corporate world or have been involved in other businesses more centered in the traditional technology space. So what got you interested in this crazy world of blockchain and digital currency and making a move from something perhaps a little more traditional model to something that's a lot more cutting edge than what we've seen before? Who wants to start with?
I'll take that because I took time off to raise my family. So I ended up having to volunteer. My kids are in a parent participation program. And so it was natural for me to go into the volunteering space and helping others and things. So I already had a technology background. So I thought, why can't we use AI and blockchain to implement these things that I feel are wrong in this country and how we can fix it. So that's just, just my nature of wanting to help others and having a technology background.
Yeah, my journey was a little bit interesting. So basically, my background was more so in infrastructure development, economic development, kind of looking at the foundation part of how we build public policy and ways of implementing growth in people and physical infrastructure. But I'm looking into voting and how can we do like more of a democratized direct voting, because I'm not a big fan of kind of the republic approach to things where you're represented by others. I kind of like more of an informed democracy. And I was trying to figure out how do we execute that, how do we do that, and as I was realizing how hard of a difficult problem that is, and I was looking at different consensus systems that people are using, and I came across the work of Ethereum at the time, and kind of the proof of work system that they were using, and the smart contracts. I was trying to determine if that was viable and what the weaknesses were. And then from there, I identified that all blockchains fundamentally have an issue with quantum resistance. Like when quantum computing happens within the next 5, 10, 15 years, they're all going to be vulnerable to that because of the way that the cryptography is. So I said, this is a big problem for this technology that I think is dope. So how do I solve that problem? So I joined the project, the Quantum Resistant Ledger, and that's kind of where I took my deep dive in, is like helping build out a cryptocurrency that was mitigating against that problem. And then as that reached like the top 100 cryptocurrency, $100 million valuation, I want to do something I'm more passionate about, because this isn't quite what I want to do. This was just my segue into the space. And that's when I saw the opportunity to do the Digital Reserve. Hope that was too long.
That's good.
Very interesting. So, unlike you, I don't have a tech background, but I remember in 2009 when I was still working for Reuters, and we reported on Bitcoin and like we report. Actually, I was doing the market reports, and then we reported on how it hit 1,000 and everything we think is crazy at that time, and so we forgot about it. We reported, we think about it, and later on I realized that some people who bought blockchain, some underdogs from China, who were selling beef on e-commerce platforms and who became a Bitcoin billionaire and lived in the Silicon Valley here, Chandler Gore. Probably some of you know him. very interesting guy. But then just like some of those stories of how underdog became billionaires and investing in social in projects that have with the social impact and everything. And I just realized that those are a bunch of idealists and misfits and people who have this idea of change the world and like you want to have a social revolution and say no to the vested interest, right? So I think that really fascinates me, and I'm already doing shows on innovation, and I talk to a lot of VCs and a lot of people. But I think that this area, this is so new, and but it could really give us what internet failed to deliver, the internet era. So that is how I'm focusing my time and efforts on this space. Basic.
Okay. I got into, when I first started in public health, I went to school for biology. I thought I was going to be a nurse. I didn't have money for nursing school or the bandwidth to even do all that. So I just went into public health. From there, I actually worked for many years and still do with San Francisco Department of Public Health, UCSF, USF. I've worked on major projects with like some of the top folks in the field, worked on state, local, national before I was 25. Opened up a health center, started a health organization, but also got into the social enterprise space because I was so tired of what I saw with the mismanagement of funds in the nonprofit philanthropy and also in the private sector space. So going into social entrepreneurship, I got involved with an organization that was teaching about alternative economies, et cetera. And I learned about Bitcoin in 2013, and I wish I would have just bought it then. But I was a little bit skeptical. But I was like, I learned about time banking, and immediately we actually incorporated a time bank into our organization, so like for healthcare exchange and whatnot. Fast forward, I actually got reintroduced to like cryptocurrency, not blockchain, cryptocurrency as a whole with the whole Bitcoin, Ethereum madness. And immediately started teaching classes in the community. So we started doing something called economic health fairs on Black Friday to get people out of shopping and into actually like taking care of like their finances and whatnot. I just was teaching the community about blockchain, cryptocurrency, or whatever. And then that's when I had already started designing our own platform for the healthcare organization I started. But then I was like, you know what? My platform is not going to be effective if my community does not know about it. So then that's when I started the Blockchain for Social Justice. We had a really dope conference, which Jomari spoke at. Had a whole bunch of folks there. We had the state treasurer, Fiona Ma, was there, she spoke. The director of the Human Rights Commission for San Francisco, she spoke. David Traub, he was the executive producer for the Steve Jobs film, he spoke. And Ferris, he's like the head of smart cities for the United Nations Blockchain Council. So we had those folks come, and then we have folks who are like working in social justice movements who are literally like, I know you guys hate, some of y'all can't stand this, but the folks who are shutting down the freeways, the folks who are working with the homeless population, the folks who are working in these grassroots nonprofits, we brought all of them to the space to teach them about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and gave away free tokens there. So that's how I got into blockchain and just still doing that work. It's super fun.
All right, so questions. Let's turn it over to the audience and see what questions you have for our great panel here tonight. Who would like to start?
So we talked a lot about cryptocurrency and technology and what have you, but what do you guys think about adoption in terms of like how to get people to actually adopt the technology, but also how to get them to actually use the technology? Because oftentimes what ends up happening is that if it's not a trade, in some sort of exchange, people are not really paying attention. So how are you able to do that, and what do you see will increase the adoption over time?
I think what Daisy said earlier was actually really accurate. The social impact space is probably the most likely area for actually generating adoption because you're solving the needs for people. And specifically, like in our case, we're trying to facilitate this micro lending. However, because it's uncollateralized lending, which most of the lending actually functions out in this space is all collateralized lending. Because we actually are doing it without collateral, that provides an opening for those who are in the space to actually have access to the cryptocurrency, have a reason to leverage it as long as it maintains or has some value, and there's a market for it determining that value. But then you also have to consider your on-ramping and off-ramping, even at that point, because you have friction points. And then, so even if you have in their hands, it becomes the friction of how do you leverage it and utilize it. So for us, we believe that we need to take an acupuncture approach, where we can't solve it everywhere. But as an organization, we can actually go into certain areas and then like generate the stories and the proof that should demonstrate what this can look like, how it can function, getting the specific partners you need to make that happen. And that becomes the model for other places to use. that's one of the reasons why we're trying to launch our demonstration in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania and Liberia simultaneously, so we can demonstrate the viability inside both areas and create models of how it can be done in two different areas. So that's kind of.
So one way we're trying to, create the adoption for time banking, we're very lucky that the people who are, associated with time banking have been doing this for years, but we have new people like Andrew Yang, who's running for president in 2020. We are working directly with him, so when he's going out there and campaigning, he's also talking about the time banking movement, about universal basic income, and a lot of the things he outlaid in his book we're already working on, so it was a perfect partner. But we're partnering with a lot of crypto for good companies. I mean, we need each other. We have to stick together to get the word out. That's another way, and it's all a grassroots movement. That's the best way. The people, we're giving the power. Blockchain's giving the power to the people, so we can make that change. We're not depending on, the government. We've been disappointed long enough, so we have to make that change.
Yeah, I think this is a really good question, because it is adoption. It is the big elephant in the room, right? So and I agree with Jomari and Nita. I think just look for where the real needs are, right? So when people have the needs, and then they could put up with the inconvenience of the technology for a while. And I think from the other hand, like startups and engineers, developers out there, when they design the product, and they really, probably need to consider, they need to design it for the general public, not only just for the tech people, not just for the tech community, so that the user experience is important, right? So imagine how you try to buy Bitcoin, you try to do anything, like, it's very complicated for non-tech people. So I think if the community out there could take the message and try to upgrade on that front, that would help as well. And also on the media side, we see a lot of blockchain media out there, but a lot of those content out there are very technical. And so just general public just don't have the interest. And so we also, that's our responsibility as storyteller also to bring the message, to show people, to educate people, to inspire people. Sometimes the technology is not ready yet, but we do need to lead people to show them the potentials and to tell the human story, to let people embrace the industry. And I think that is how the real adoption would happen.
I think really my job is to be that bridge walker, coming from the old space and from the nonprofit world, local government, et cetera, and bringing those folks into the blockchain space and vice versa. Healthy nepotism, right? So, like for instance, we're going to be hosting an event on the 14th with the state treasurer, board of equalization, elected officials, the blockchain community, and folks who are doing work in the economic justice space, right? So we brought all those different ecosystems together. We've been going into non-traditional spaces to share this message. Like, we did a whole day with the San Francisco Human Rights Commission. That's over 200 young Black and Brown folks from the different low-income communities in San Francisco. We did another event. We're about to do another event, S3, where we're going to. There's an organization called the California Asset Building Coalition, and it's a coalition of over 200 to 300 economic development nonprofits, right, that are working within these communities, and they want to know about blockchain. Yeah. That is amazing, right? So we're kind of like ahead of the curve in some ways here in California, because immediately we're just like, you know what, let's go tell the community about this and make sure that they know about this as well. Like for SF Blockchain Week, we organized an event, Blockchain for Social Justice, and we invited all the folks who knew nothing really about blockchain or the state of our economic system, and they learned so much. And then we're hosting the incubator too, so I think these are just the ways in which we can promote mass adoption. Yeah. Me personally, I'm really on the Public Health Commission, so once my project gets built out, like, look, the contacts are right there. But, I didn't send a media release form.
All right, we might have time to slip in one more question. Let me see who we've got here.
Okay, you're gonna have to bear with me. I want to try to make something really practical. So suppose I'm with an organization that helps undocumented workers hook up with employers. Okay, I know nothing about the blockchain, my organization knows nothing about all this. How can you help me?
I actually have an organization you can connect with. You know who just reached out to me? Doctors Without Borders. They're trying to create a platform right now for identity for undocumented workers, and someone else for healthcare files. So you can sign up for the incubator the day long. It's December 1st, and we'll walk you through from start to finish how to design your project.
There you go.
There it is.
Okay, Pamela, do we have time for one more? Or, okay, one more question. Who else has another question here? In the back.
So the volatility of the cryptocurrency by itself, is it become a blocker to a lot of this?
Volatility.
Volatility, that's the design issue and kind of how you're trying to implement. Like, there are various ways that you can mitigate volatility. MakerDAO and a few of the other algorithmic stable coins mitigate that via high collateralization. The way we're trying to actually combat volatility is by actually using interest feedback rule. So as we lend out money, the interest that's generated feeds back into our monetary policy, so our monetary policy represents the actual value created on the network. So as there's actual real legitimate rationale behind the value being created and what the valuation is. There's a variety of ways. That all boils back down to your design and your metrics and the transparency of what's happening on your network. So yes, majority of them are volatile. Bitcoin is volatile because it's designed with volatility at its core. There's no metric that you can actually use to determine the value being created. Because even if you're buying milk and honey, like with your Bitcoin, there's no method for me who's somewhere else to look at what's happening and determine you're not just passing money back and forth to yourself. So since therefore I just depend on the exchange rates and upon what somebody else is willing to pay at that time, being something that does provide me a level of transparency. So if you design something internally to your network, you can actually create a methodology for determining value.
And that's called a private blockchain or federated blockchain.
Cannot a permission DLT itself solve the same problem? Cannot a permission distributed ledger technology itself solve the problem rather than elevating it into a permission blockchain? It's all about transparency of information across multiple people. A standard distributed ledger technology itself, which is the core of the blockchain, at least for the social causes, can solve this problem. The moment you introduce a currency into the system, then comes the volatility, then comes who buys it, how it is controlled, all those things. At least on the social causes, right? It is
Our
about
coin is-
transparency of the
Well,
information.
let's let Andy.
So our coin is not pegged to anything but time, so it's stable, I would say. It's you get 1 hour, you get 1 hour coin, that's it. So I don't feel like that's a volatile thing, but people are doing ICOs for the sake that they want their coins to just go up and that's why right now people are weary about those ICOs. That period for, making a whole bunch of money starting ICOs was about 9 months back? And that's not there anymore. I'm not doing an ICO for that
That's the
reason.
volatility.
Yeah,
Your 1 hour worth my 1 hour though.
always. Always. That's the whole point.
All right,
Daisy, you get the last one.
Elon Musk hours.
I hear what you're saying. There's two types of blockchain. There's the public, there's private, internal to an organization, and then there's federated, meaning that it's owned by a certain number of organizations. Me personally, we're doing a federated blockchain so we can kind of control for that volatility because if we're all on the same page, we all co-own this platform, we see who's kind of coming in and out, who's selling tokens. It kind of puts our value system is, if we want these tokens to be a value for everyone within the network, then we're going to kind of abide by these different rules to make sure that everyone has wealth and not just a couple folks. So that's something else to think about too. What type of blockchain are you building?
All right, before I turn it back to Pemo, please give this panel a warm round of applause. Great job.